Thanks for clicking play on the latest edition of Iowa Revolution. My name is Spencer. He's Dr. Bob. Good to see you, Dr. Bob.
Good to see you, Spencer.
A lot of stuff to talk about today. First of all, I did want to mention right off the top, we mentioned in our conversation last week with Laura Bellin, we got into the weeds on her piece at Bleeding Heartland, just about the uphill climb that Democrats have, just based on the pure voter registration numbers, which are pretty stark. And again, I would recommend reading that if you haven't already. So we said that we were going to reach out to Rita Hart. She, of course, is the chair of the Iowa Democratic Committee. So I did reach out to her pretty much right after the show last Wednesday, got a response back right away. Rita said that she was looping in her comms team, and now I've not heard back. Emailed her again on Monday, just saying, hey, have you had a chance to talk about this, and have not yet heard back. So we're going to continue to effort having her, at least some sort of representative from the state Democratic Party, to get on the show. Dr. Bob, I think first of all, I think a lot of people want to hear from them on what their plan is to close that gap. And then I think that you specifically have some good ideas that they should be willing to listen to.
Well, I don't know if I have any ideas
You do.
that a
You
lot of
do.
other people don't
Absolutely.
have.
And I think it would be a good conversation to have. I don't want to be accusatory or feel like or make her feel like we're not on the same side, but I do think that there could be some collaboration between all of us.
And I think that that would show leadership and engagement and show people that, how hard they're working. And I'm sure they are, but a lot of us don't know a lot about it. And I just want to know what's happening. And so does everybody else. And so I see it as an opportunity. It's not like we're going to ambush anybody, but, you know, it's a Republican kind of thing to do to not engage with the media. So I hope that, Rita comes on. I've interviewed her many times and it's always productive.
So, as I said, a lot of stuff to get to on the show today. We're going to start off with we've talked many times, and people know that Iowa's cancer rate is the second highest in the country, second to only Kentucky. Of course, they are the highest smoking rate state in the nation, of course, with their local tobacco industry. So we are second to them, and we also are the only state with a growing cancer rate, and that has now made international news. We're going to talk about a story from The Guardian right here in a second. Also, a great piece in Bleeding Heartland from Ed Tibbetts just recently published, talking about the cuts to Medicaid and how the Republicans are trying to say that, oh, we're going to try to save Medicaid by doing these cuts. And that, of course, is just a lie. Also, some political news going on. Wanted to get to some more ICE and DHS news. They have detention facilities right now that are being visited by Congress members. We've seen people have fights, you might want to say, with ICE facility, members trying to guard those facilities and trying to kick those congresspersons out. So we'll discuss some new rules that DHS is trying to put in place to limit the capacity for those congresspeople to come visit those facilities. We are also, on the cutting edge of the National Weather Service talk recently. A lot of cuts have been made to NOAA and the National Weather Service. And I wanted to update people on the latest news there because a lot of meteorologists have sent a letter to NOAA and to the officials that are trying to cut NOAA to hopefully save people's lives. And then towards the end of the show, we also talk a lot about artificial intelligence on this show, Dr. Bob. And I work in radio. You used to work in radio. You're retired from radio. And a radio station in Australia straight up fooled their audience with artificial intelligence. So I wanted to talk about that. We do have a factoid of the week and also top 5 TV dads. Who's your favorite TV
Works
dad,
for me.
Dr. Bob?
My favorite TV dad.
When I say TV dad, who comes to mind?
I don't know. It's like TV dads, for the most part, TV dads, there for a long time, they were portrayed as stupid. And
Yes.
I've never liked that. I have to say, yeah, my favorite TV dad of all time, I know he was problematic in real life, but was Desi Arnaz on I Love Lucy.
Sure.
And am I dating myself or what? That's like, 2 centuries ago. But he
So
was,
I'm going to say, as soon as you said this may be problematic, I thought you were going to say Bill Cosby. And I was, no, don't say Bill Cosby. So what was Desi Arnaz? What did he do? I didn't know that would be problematic.
well, yeah, he was a serial adulterer.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's like, I mean, he was this whole, he invented, I mean, he invented modern television in many ways. He was, on the I Love Lucy show, Desi Arnaz, I guess. He was just fantastic. He was a good dad. They had a real life, had a little boy and had to time it for the show. They couldn't, it was all kinds of interesting things going on that we could do a whole show on. There's a new book about him that I've been reading about. But yeah, he was a serial philanderer. He was, let me just say, he spent a lot of time with ladies of the evening.
Gotcha. Okay. So a great TV dad, maybe not the best real dad.
True.
We'll leave it at that. So this is from The Guardian right off the top. 6 months ago, Alex Hammer was diagnosed with colon cancer at the age of 37. Diane Chambers endured surgery, chemotherapy, and dozens of rounds of radiation to fight aggressive breast cancer. And Janin Haugen spends most days helping care for her 16-year-old grandson, who is still being treated for brain cancer he developed at the age of 7. The three were among a group of about 24 people who came together last week in a small town in central Iowa to share their experiences of cancer. They are part of a new research project investigating potential environmental causes for what the American Cancer Society's advocacy arm calls a cancer crisis in the state. For the last few years, Iowa has had the second highest rate of cancer in the nation and is only one of 2 U.S. states where cancer is increasing. And I'm quoting from Carrie Johansson here. She is the Senior Director of Policy at the Iowa Environmental Council, a nonprofit focused on improving the environment and helping to lead the project. She said, people in rural communities are getting sick. Cancer is just everywhere. Every person I talk to knows somebody that has recently had a cancer diagnosis. It's just a constant drumbeat. It's scary, end quote.
Yeah, it is scary. I mean, I think the Harkin Institute might be involved with this project as well, and want to acknowledge them. I think I'm remembering correctly. But yes, telling those cancer stories are really important. And I mean, we all have them. I mean, my mother's cancer, it plagued her for years. My dad had a successful small business. You know, she was in terrible pain and suffered a lot, and they ended up going into bankruptcy because of cancer. That's another thing that is terrible about this country is the cancer rate, but then also the health insurance and that people go bankrupt because of their medical bills. And so I don't know, it's very personal. I just and we need to do something about it, but I don't think that we'll see who has the courage to do it. And one of the things I'm going to say is that there's a lot of people that think that that's tied to a lot of chemicals, mainly used in agriculture. And one of the things that people should do, I saw a map the other day that looked at cancer rates by county. And if you follow the Des Moines River and the Raccoon River, those are where the highest cancer rates are adjacent to the rivers. So it's, it's pretty interesting. And it's the same kind of thing same kind of strategy that people are using that they did to deny that smoking caused cancer. And it's the way science works is that sometimes, there are multiple factors. Radon is an issue. I mean, there's multiple factors, but
Yeah,
one
Iowa
has
does
to
have a
look at.
fairly large, drinking rate compared to other states, and there are anecdotal things that you could bring up. But like you said, with this rate of cancer, it can't just be that we have a little bit more drinking in our state. That doesn't explain why it's so high.
Well, and the thing is that, people are talking about, the water quality crisis, and, Chris Jones is leading that. And the thing is that if you isolate things like, well, we can't prove that agricultural chemicals are causing cancer, you can prove that there's all kinds of devastating environmental effects related to agriculture, not just cancer. So it's like we can still talk about solutions. Farmers are going to farm, but there's the voluntary procedures that are in place right now aren't working. The Iowa nutrient strategy isn't working. And so it's a suite of consequences. It's like, and I don't know how many times I've said that they're treating Iowa like it's the backside of the moon, exploiting all the resources that they can without any concern for the environment or little concern over the environment. Lots of hand wringing over the environment, but no real action. And or the human consequences, the human consequences here being high cancer rates.
There's human consequences. There are also, as you mentioned, financial consequences for that individual, and then, of course, for their whole family. There are people that are losing their entire livelihoods. They're losing their house, they're losing their estate to pay for whether it's nursing homes or for cancer care late in their life or for hospice care. And there's no solutions coming from the Republicans at all. And I think we need more solutions as a state because this is also an issue because we are ill equipped as a state to solve this issue with our healthcare. Rural hospitals are closing down. We're seeing, obviously, if these Medicaid cuts come through, that's going to hurt this state a lot more than it might some other states. So not only do we have this issue, we're also ill equipped to address it.
Right, and it's just going to get worse and worse. And if people don't have the Medicaid, they're going to go to hospital emergency rooms. It's going to cost everybody more. And maybe I don't know, the Republicans don't care about it costing everybody more because it costing everybody more means that the billionaires will make more money.
That's how they make more money.
Yeah.
And then just two things just to kind of put a bow on this. Just before we got in the air, Dr. Bob, I think it was from Iowa Capital Dispatch. In fact, I'm sure it was from Iowa Capital Dispatch. They just had a report about another spill of petroleum in the Nishnabotna River, the West Nishnabotna River in southwest Iowa. Of course, they're busy right now trying to clean it up from the last spill that they had. And they actually noticed this spill while they were trying to clean up some of the effects from the previous spill. So that another spill and they know where it's coming from. In fact, there was even a report in 2011 that they had a leak in one of their underground tanks and nothing was ever done about it. So now that's the first place they're going to look, of course, but they don't know whether it's that leak or maybe there's a new leak that's affecting this area. So, I mean, that's just one of many things that are going on all across the state.
Yeah, well, and Joni says we're all going to die anyway, so what's the big deal?
Yeah. Why are we even, why?
I read that press release on that spill, and it has one big lie that I see repeated time and time again from the DNR. It's the biggest lie they tell, and we let them get away with it. They always say there is no evidence that any of the contaminant reached any waterway. Everything reaches the waterway. We can't let them get by because just
they were
because
saying that they were trying their best to contain it. It's like, yeah, I get that you can kind of dig ditches and stuff, but there's no way that that doesn't get through. And then also the fact that it's in the ground too. So eventually it's going to make its way to groundwater or it make its way downstream. And they don't even know how big this leak is because of all of the factors that we just mentioned, because it goes downstream, because it goes underground. So it's hard to even calculate how much damage has really been done.
Right. And I keep waiting for the Republicans to all of a sudden say, hey, we don't need to be doing these press releases anymore.
Really? Yeah.
They
Why
don't
even
want
let
us.
people know if you're not going to be honest about it anyway?
Well, and the thing is, it's for them, they don't care about the consequences. They don't want to look at the logic. They don't want to look at the causes of cancers in their own families because they don't want agriculture to be seen as a problem. So the only reason they don't like these spills, they probably think they're inevitable. It's a cost of doing business. They just don't like the bad PR that comes from the press releases. So look for the press releases. Well, they've already took out 70 sensors to detect water quality. And so as soon as they have no sensors, as soon as they don't have to do press releases, as soon as there are fewer people on the landscape to notice what's going on, it's just crazy. And so that's what they want.
And just the other second thought there was, I believe it was Iowa's starting line. They usually going into the weekend will name which beaches in the state are closed. There was 9 beaches over the weekend that were closed in the state due to high levels of E. coli. So yeah, we're doing a great job, Dr. Bob. So this kind of is a good segue here to this Ed Tibbetts piece in Bleeding Heartland. Quoting Ed here, nobody wants their tax dollars going to pay for government health insurance for some dude who just hangs around his parents' basement gaming while the rest of us have to haul ourselves out of bed each morning to go to work, which is why Republicans have been focusing so much on the Medicaid work requirements in Donald Trump's big, ugly tax bill. They won't admit the money they save by taking health insurance away from millions of poor Americans will go to finance tax cuts for some of the wealthiest families in the country. So they falsely claim these cuts will protect the most vulnerable, who are also covered by Medicaid. As I previously pointed out, this claim is not true. If it were, the money they plan to save on these work requirements would go to trim Medicaid waiting lists or to bolster care for Iowans who rely on already struggling rural hospitals. But they don't. They go to pay for tax cuts. Still, the image of forcing that lazy 29-year-old man off his couch and into the workforce is a powerful one, and it is the foundation of the Republicans' campaign to sell Trump's bill. And this is an editor's note from Laura Bellin. U.S. Representative Ashley Hinson has repeatedly used this frame. For example, she told some Iowa reporters in a conference call last month, the intent of Medicaid is to protect those with disabilities, seniors, single mothers with children, not 29-year-old men playing video games on their mother's couch in the basement. So obviously, those are marching orders for them to say. By the way, none of that is really true. A study published at the end of April demonstrates these able-bodied non-working people on Medicaid actually are. First, they're rare, and for the most part, they're not men. 4 out of 5 are women. Their average age is 41. 1 out of 4 is a woman over the age of 50. On average, they live in households of 4.4 people. They have no income of their own, and the average income of their families is less than $45,000 per year. Think about those images for a moment. How many of us know women who live in such a struggling household, who are just trying to get by, who, if they didn't have Medicaid, would have no health insurance at all?
Lots, lots. And good for Ed for doing this. He is such a great reporter, and he has a Substack called Along the Mississippi, and
Yeah.
he really focuses on that part of the state. And he's just really a fantastic reporter, so people should subscribe. But yeah, it's the contemporary sort of welfare queen that Ronald Reagan came up with. You've got to give a face to the or a profile anyway of who of the Republicans. They have to create somebody for you to hate. Okay, so they structure a straw man in this instance or a straw woman, and we've all seen women in similar situations like that, and a lot of times. Many or most of the women will have sacrificed their careers for their family, raise their kids out of the market, and something happens to the marriage, and they're in trouble. The economic,
And the
so
person the person that was just described in these statistics is a mom.
yeah,
Maybe a single mom or the mom of somebody that works at a factory or something, and she stays at home because they can't afford health or not health care but child care in the first place. So she
right,
stays home, and we help that woman raise her child by helping provide health insurance for that family. That's what I would like my tax dollars to go towards.
right, and Republicans see this as supporting people that aren't deserving, when it's an investment in the American people and in children and in all of us. It's a social safety net that we need.
Well, and it's also just a part of the authoritarian character of MAGA, where
Yeah.
they worship power. As long as you are powerful, you're worth worshiping. And if you're low on the totem pole, if you are unemployed, or if you're a single mom, then you're looked down upon because you're powerless. And that's just the way that their mind works. I wish we could change that in some way. I know that we can change it, just not as fast as I think we would like. So I think that's the biggest issue is just there's a huge segment of the population that do have the mentality that those people aren't worth protecting.
Well, there's a Christian air quotes right philosophy that says, I've written about this, I don't know how many times, but it says that you are responsible for your situation and you have to solve the problems. And the way that you solve the problems is you believe in Jesus. And if you believe in Jesus, then that will provide you with the means somehow to be successful. So if you're a person of faith, this is all tied to the prosperity gospel,
Right.
in the sense that if you do this, if you believe in Jesus, everything's okay. The problem with those, people, from the Christian right is that they don't believe in Jesus. That's the real problem. And they don't like the state to intervene because they see the state as every time the state feeds somebody that's poor, it denies the church a chance at conversion.
That's a great point.
So yeah, so there's that, it's your responsibility first, then your family, your broader family, then your church brethren, and then the church should be able to solve problems. And so the problem is your lack of belief in Jesus on this far right Christian air quotes uh, perspective.
You'll agree with me on this. I think that's bullshit. I think that's a, I think I'm serious. I mean, I'm joking obviously a little bit, but I'm saying that I think that that's a rationalization for those in power to
Oh,
keep the
absolutely.
people in that and on the part of pastors, mega churches, people that have clout in the Christian right. Of course, Charlie Kirk and the ilk, they know that they're lying. They know that these are all rationalizations of keeping power for them and the people that they think are deserving of power.
Well, I think that the more secular members of the far right are using those people. There are people that actually believe this.
Sure.
I mean, I've talked to
Oh
them
yeah.
that believe this. And so the more secular members are just, using that and perpetuating that. And I think it's a tragedy. So that means there should be no snap. They don't want any snap because a person should solve the problem themselves or the family or the church. There shouldn't be Medicaid. Everybody should have a good enough job. So it's it's this sort of, I don't know, it's a projection of where a lot of people aspire to be, but it's like they act like everybody can be the CEO.
Right.
That everybody, if you try hard enough, you can be the CEO.
It's a good
No,
example.
not
Here's a good
everybody
example.
can be.
So I took over for you. I do run the polls now for our radio station, but you used to do our daily polls. And one of the ones that really sticks out is you asked, are you a follower or are you a leader? And I believe it was like 62 to 38% said that they were a leader,
Mhm.
which obviously that cannot be true. In
Right.
fact, if it was even if it was the opposite, 38 to 62 said I was a leader, that's still like that's way too many leaders here. you know so I do think that even people as individuals might think of themselves as more important, or at least the potentiality to have more importance.
Well, and it's this competitive Darwinian world that you have to struggle and crawl over each other, and that's not the way that it should be. It doesn't have to be that way, and they act like if we gave free lunches to kids, they act like, oh, that's like you don't feed the bears at Yellowstone because the bears become dependent. And so that's what they think is happening. Rather than investing in the lunches for kids so that kids can learn, they think it's like feeding the bears, becoming dependent upon the garbage cans or whatever. And that's just a false comparison.
Be honest, even the 29-year-old guy playing video games that is in his mom's basement, that's a very depressed life. That's not the life that that person wants to be leading. You know what I mean? Like, I
Um,
don't think that you know, is an attractive way to make money. Oh, I'm just going to be on welfare and Medicaid and just play video games for the rest of my life, and that will make me happy. Not saying that there aren't people like that, but I'm just saying the vast majority of people want to contribute to their communities and society.
exactly.
This is some cock talk, some political news. This is from The Hill. The Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, is placing new limitations on lawmakers seeking to visit detention facilities, releasing guidelines in the wake of visits from Democrats that have turned confrontational. Members of Congress have the legal right to make unannounced visits to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement facilities, or ICE facilities. But new guidance posted by ICE seeks to rein in that power, asking lawmakers to give 72 hours notice before any visits, while requiring their staff to give 24 hours notice. Though lawmakers retain the ability to make unannounced visits to ICE detention facilities, the new policy blocks them from visiting field offices where most agency action takes place. And I'm quoting now DHS Secretary Kristi Noem's new policy to block congressional oversight of ICE facilities is not only unprecedented, it is an affront to the Constitution and federal law. Noem is now not only attempting to restrict when members can visit, but completely blocking access to ICE field offices, even if members schedule visits in advance. No matter how much she and President Trump want to force us to live under their authoritarian rule, ICE is not above oversight, and the department must follow the law. And that was Representative Benny Thompson, Democrat from Mississippi, and he said that in a statement.
Well, of course, I can't read everything, but I've yet to read the most important question I think that the media should be asking is, what are you trying to hide?
Exactly.
So what are they trying to hide?
Yeah, if you need 72 hours to know.
Cruelty?
Yeah, if I call a friend and he says you got to give me 72 hours notice before you come over, I'm thinking they're doing something weird.
Yes.
They don't want to get caught doing something, and this is ridiculous.
Right. They should be prepared to accept visitors from Congress, in a few minutes. I mean, it's an operating facility with a chain of command and a person that, should be serving as some kind of a conduit to Congress, a communications thing, and give them. We should be able to drop in unannounced because Congress
for
should be
us.
Right.
They work for us.
Right.
I should be able to walk up to a facility and say, "What are you guys doing in there?" Not saying I got to go in, but like, "Hey, I pay taxes.
Right.
I'm paying for your uniforms."
Right. When we elect representatives, and our representatives should be able to go in,
Right.
whenever they want to go in.
Correct. Especially if they're in your district, which is what we've seen so far. Obviously, these are congressmen and women that are visiting facilities that are in the district that they're representing. So again, they are representing the people that want to know what's going on in these facilities. And we have a right to know.
Right. And so what we need to assume until we hear otherwise from representatives of Congress, that there are atrocities going on inside, that there's abuse going on inside. We have to consider the worst case scenario. And this is what Democrats frequently do, is consider, and in the Trump administration, they should, what are the worst things that can happen? What are the atrocities? And so what are they hiding? It's not good.
Well, we know of at least several dozen, last I knew was 30 United States citizens that had been detained by ICE. And that's the only ones that we know of so far.
Well, only 10% of the ones that they've apprehended have had some kind of violent crime on their record.
Right.
Of all the people that have been arrested.
And something Laura and I talked about on Monday night's Capital Week on KHOI is, and we've talked about it before, how Joni Ernst had gone into an elementary school in Storm Lake and said, "You don't have anything to worry about. We're not going after farm workers. We're not going after agricultural workers or plant workers." And of course, we saw in Omaha, just across the border, we saw a plant that was raided by ICE and people were detained there. So it's been close to here. We haven't seen any large scale ICE operations, but we do know that that's basically a lie that Joni Ernst told those elementary schools, that if they're going to do it in Omaha, they'll do it in Storm Lake.
Well, and Art Cohen, who's been writing about this, Storm Lake Times Tribune, that people are frightened in Storm Lake. People aren't coming out, and so it's hurting businesses. It's hurting the entire economy. Right. Storm Lake Times pilot. Yeah, check out Art.
Let's take a wider scope here. This is a wider scope. It also affects us here locally. This is from the Cedar Rapids Gazette. The National Weather Service, which is responsible for tracking storms and warning the public about them, has lost hundreds of employees to federal cuts and voluntary resignations. President Trump also wants to reduce the budget of National Weather Service's parent agency, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, by more than a quarter. On the heels of deadly storms across the Mississippi River Basin and ahead of a hurricane season that's predicted to be worse than average, 5 former National Weather Service heads released a letter last month outlining their concerns regarding the cuts. Albert Joe Friday Jr. signed the letter. He served as director of the National Weather Service from 1988 until 1997. He also spoke with the Mississippi River Basin Ag and Water Desk about his operational concerns under the proposed changes. I'm quoting Friday here, and this was in an interview that was published in the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Again, this is Friday. The Weather Service is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week operation, 365 days a year. The staffing levels are right now, as a result of the cuts that have already occurred, the lowest they have been since I can remember. Again, he goes back to 1988. There are below 4,000 people right now in the National Weather Service. What's happened now is that you have several offices that are no longer staffed to the levels that they can provide 24-hour-day operation. Several of them are closing on the night shift. Now, whenever they see a storm coming, they stress. They bring in people overtime and they'll put them on and they'll try to do the best possible job that they can to provide the best possible service they can. We have several offices around the country that have no chief or meteorologist in charge any longer. The Houston office, again, the Houston office, the fourth largest city in the country, has lost all three of its senior people right now.
Yes, as hurricane season is upon
Hurricane
us.
season in Houston.
Yeah.
And they have nobody in charge, not even the third guy in charge.
Yeah. Well, and FEMA is ill prepared to respond to any national disaster because Trump doesn't want FEMA to even exist. He wants the states to handle it all on their own.
Or hand out the money himself. Or he'll just pick and choose which states suck up to him the most, and then he'll give them the money and then make the other states grovel to get even, a little pittance of what they really need to get back going.
Yeah. It's a terrible situation. We're going to pay on both ends. We're going to pay because we aren't going to have the forecasts that we need, and we're going to pay because we won't have the support that we need in the aftermath of a terrible storm.
And Dr. Bob, you and I are not meteorologists, not trained meteorologists, but we do play them on the radio. I've covered hundreds of storms in my lifetime. I think I'm probably at least an amateur meteorologist at this point. These people put in long ass hours, and they're doing this because they, first of all, love the job. A lot of these people probably grew up loving the weather, and this is literally their dream job. But also something that's foreign to a lot of the people that are firing them is their sense of duty.
Yes.
They don't just say, hey, it's my end of the clock, I'm leaving, the lights are off, and everybody can go about their business. It's no, people are depending on me, so I'm going to stay late and make sure that they're informed. Thank God for people like those.
Right. And they're across all of our government agencies, a sense of duty. They went into government to serve people, and everything from the CDC to the National Weather Service, NOAA, Commerce, anything, they want to serve. I mean, sure, there's some people in there that are problematic, but there are people that are problematic everywhere. But we used to call them public servants, and there are people that see themselves still that way. I talked to a woman fired from the CDC, and she'd been there like 20 years, and it's just heartbreaking because you are exactly right that duty doesn't count. And it does, Donald Trump couldn't even explain what duty is.
You'd probably chuckle at the word. Haha, you said duty.
Yeah. He doesn't get it.
Let's get to this last story. This is Iowa. And this is, again, or at least I'm currently in radio. Dr. Bob was in radio for almost 20 years. We worked together at a local radio station in Knoxville. So this is certainly near and dear to, our profession, our vocation. This is from Vice. For 6 months, an Australian radio station aired a daily show hosted by a young-sounding woman named Thai. By the way, I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation, but I'm going to say Thai. Cheerful, confident, and always on beat until listeners started asking, who is she? Turns out she's not a person at all. CADA, a Sydney-based station owned by Australian Radio Network, ran Workdays with Thai every weekday, with Thai introducing tracks and hosting music commentary for hours a day. The station promoted her as a fresh voice curating the latest hits, but never mentioned that voice came from a machine. Listeners grew suspicious. The station didn't let its audience know she wasn't real until Sydney-based writer Stephanie Coombs began asking questions in a blog post. Eventually, ARN came clean. Thai wasn't real. She was an AI-generated voice cloned from an actual ARN employee created in collaboration with 11 Labs. And I'm quoting from ARN project leader Fayed Tome in a now deleted LinkedIn post. No mic, no studio, just code and vibes. The revelation sparked backlash. While there are no laws in Australia requiring radio stations to disclose the use of AI, many argue that CADA's secrecy undermined listener trust. Theresa Lim, a vice president of the Australian Association of Voice Actors, called the move deceptive. Quoting her now, AI can be a powerful and positive tool in broadcasting if there are correct safeguards in place. Authenticity and truth are important for broadcast media. The public deserves to know the source of what's being broadcast. I will agree.
Yeah, I think that it's good, but I think it's inevitable. It's going to happen. I mean, it's already on your Spotify account. You have a guide or whatever they call them, introduces you to music. They use the algorithms to get you the music that you like or you might like, and you give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And the guy or gal comes back and talks to you, and we've got this for you this morning, and it's inevitable. I mean, it's here. It's on my phone. It's right
Oh, I
here.
know. Oh, I know.
Spotify. I don't. So I guess that was at a radio station makes us feel particularly vulnerable, I guess. And just think how it can manipulate things. Well, and we know that it doesn't work with news. We know it doesn't work with sports, but it's going to just get better and better and better. And a whole lot of people like us are going to be out of work. And
Doc-
not just us. It's going to take people, the oligarchs are going to use this stuff to just get rid of as many as we can of us as they can so they don't have to pay us. And they're going to have to start considering some kind of universal basic income, for the people that are out of work. And they're not going to like that
Say
because there's going to be taxes.
we are screwed because that is the case. That's what should be happening. But that seems like a long, long ways off, and we are going to have a lot of people living in destitute conditions for a long time before anything actually gets solved on that front. By the way, have you ever heard of the dead internet theory, Dr. Bob?
No, I haven't.
So this is from Wikipedia. So again, I mean, AI has sort of taken over every aspect and now radio, but anytime you get on the internet, you're seeing AI images. Most of what you're reading is probably some sort of bot or artificial intelligence that's just programmed to say what it's saying. So the dead internet theory is a conspiracy theory that asserts due to a coordinated and intentional effort, the internet now consists mainly of bot activity and automatically generated content manipulated by algorithmic curation to control the population and minimize organic human activity. Proponents of the theory believe these social bots were created intentionally to help manipulate algorithms and boost search results in order to manipulate consumers. Some proponents of the theory accuse government agencies of using bots to manipulate public perception. And the date given for this death is generally around 2016 or 2017. So right around when Trump ascended to the presidency.
Yeah.
But
I don't even
mean,
know
I know
what.
it's a conspiracy theory, but it's hard not to look at the internet and think, what is real? Who of these people am I on this platform with are actual living, breathing human beings using their brain, their thoughts to communicate?
Well, I think that sometimes we can still tell. We can look at the images, we can hear the voices, we can hear, discrepancies, and we can see them in the videos. But that's what's that? Another 6 months that we're going to uh, be able to discern that.
I was going to say, I mean, even looking at AI generated images from several months ago compared to now, I mean, literally 2 months ago compared to now, you can already see that it's becoming difficult for me, somebody that does have, social media experience and does look out for those specific kinds of things. I can be tricked. And
Well, and what people do,
if I can be
yeah, we can
tricked,
be
I know a
tricked.
lot of other people can be tricked.
Well, the thing is that people don't know that haven't been in radio. We can hear all kinds of things in a person's voice. And we can tell whether it's natural or it's synthetic. We can tell what's been cut. We can tell that here at this point, nobody else is going to hear it, but you and I will hear that they cut some dialogue or they cut some of the audio or they pasted some of the audio. We can hear those subtle little things, and we can hear them today, but it's not going to be long until we can't.
Because even when I had played that, was it Speechify? I think I had cloned my voice with Speechify, and this was probably going on a year or even more ago. And you could tell the difference. You could tell, okay, that does sound a little robotic there. There's a little change in the tone or timbre that's not quite right. But I guarantee you, if I were to go back and do that today, it would be 1,000 times better than it was, a year ago.
Yep.
Let's have our factoid of the week, Dr. Bob. An animal factoid
So
this week. I've been focusing on geography. I feel like I'm starting to find out what Dr. Bob finds interesting. So I think this one is pretty interesting. The duck-billed platypus has no nipples to feed their offspring. Instead, milk oozes from their skin.
That's pretty amazing.
So they
It's
do have
just,
they do have mammary glands, but they don't have teats. So it secretes out of their stomach basically, and then goes into these little folds and lines, and then their babies, their offspring will go in and kind of lick it out of that little fold in their skin.
well, and nipples are just, they're essentially a sweat gland that has evolved to do that different function. And so that's not surprising at all to me, at all. So that's very interesting. And platypuses are very interesting. I've just always found them interesting. And they're egg-laying mammals, as you say.
I was gonna say
And
they're just entirely unique, very strange animals.
well, yeah, I think they're the class of maybe order Monotreme, and I think there's 7 or 8 extinct species in that order class, and the platypus is the only extant species.
Well, keep it going, platypuses. We need you
Yes,
around. Top five TV dads. Outside looking in, by the way, I got to have this on the list, even though he's not necessarily my top five. I think a lot of people love Danny Tanner from Full House.
never heard of him.
Of course, you haven't. You've heard of number five, Homer Simpson.
Yes, Homer's great.
Number four TV dad is Frank Costanza from Seinfeld. Jerry Stiller.
I thought, yeah, he was very interesting. He was a very interesting character. His history in vaudeville and all the things that he did throughout his life. He's a treasure.
Oh, comedy legend for sure. R.I.P. By the way. Number three is Bob Belcher. Are you a Bob's Burgers fan? I think we've talked about this before, and you're not a Bob's Burgers fan, or you haven't really been. You haven't watched it.
I haven't watched it.
You would love Bob's Burgers. I guarantee you would. It's a very wholesome show, but also very funny as well. This is kind of a niche one for me, but I was a huge The OC fan back in like the early to mid 2000s. So Sandy Cohen is my number two TV dad.
Never heard of him.
Do you know the actor Peter Gallagher, known mostly for his really bushy eyebrows? Handsome guy, really dark, bushy eyebrows. You would recognize him for
I
sure.
might recognize him.
But anyway, he played Sandy Cohen on the OC. And number one is Dan Connor.
Never heard of him.
Of course, you have Roseanne. You watch Roseanne,
Oh, no, I never watched Roseanne. I found her revolting.
but you do at least, you're
No,
familiar with Dan Connor as a concept, right?
right. What's his name? Goodman.
Yeah, John Goodman. Yeah, the actor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I like him, but I never watched Roseanne. Well, I must have watched it to discover I found her disgusting. So I must
you
have
watched it
watched
long
it.
enough to form your opinion that she was revolting. So
Yeah. So I mean, it's just like I'm not going to know this TV stuff. I'm just not. I don't really watch TV. So, I mean, you can wallow in my ignorance or whatever, but it's just like, it is what it is. All, as far as I'm concerned, all this stuff is after my time. I mean, I pretty much quit watching
eh,
much TV, as after a teenager.
that's true. But I mean, I also did. I'm not going to put Andy Griffith on there, but you know who Andy Griffith is.
I know who Andy is. It was cute for the time. Now watching it would be like glacial.
See, I do like highlighting your intelligence in the first five sixth of the show. And then I do like highlighting your ignorance in the last sixth of the show.
And that's fine with me.
So,
I
by the way,
don't mind.
I do want to know other people's top, like who's your favorite TV dad? Comment on your favorite TV dad. I want to see, because that would also kind of let us know like what generation you're in too. Because like I said, I'm sure there'd be a lot of Danny Tanners and Dan Connor from Roseanne. Homer Simpson probably will be a popular one. But yeah, I want to know.
I know I do have a favorite TV dad,
Okay,
but
all yours.
I'm forgetting his name. I'm forgetting the name of the show. It was, oh, oh my God, I can't believe I'm forgetting this, but it was a husband, a wife. She was great too. Katie, somebody, and then they had two kids, a cute girl and an obnoxious boy. And
You're describing every TV show.
he was a shoe salesman.
Oh, you're talking about Al Bundy?
Yes.
Married with Children, Al Bundy. Yeah, see,
Yeah.
you know what? I may have missed out on putting Al Bundy deserves in my top five, I think. Because I loved Al Bundy.
Yeah.
Still watch Married with Children every once in a
I
while.
thought that show was great.
Yeah, that's a good
And
one. See,
I thought it was a great show.
see, you pull it out of your hat right at the end of the show, Dr. Bob.
Well,
Totally
it's
redeem
just
yourself.
that was, you know, that was in some dark recess of my brain. I don't know how I pulled that out.
Well, I'm impressed. I'm always impressed by you, Dr. Bob. It's always a pleasure to have you on. I know you got to get out of there. You're at the Smoky Row and you've only got until noon, so we'll let you get out of there and let whoever needs the room next take over. Always make sure that you follow, if you don't already, Dr. Bob's Substacks. He's got Deep Midwest Politics and Culture and also Cedar Creek Nature Notes, taking a walk in the woods with Dr. Bob. And of course, make sure if you haven't already, follow us on Substack. We are Iowa Revolution. Dr. Bob, always a pleasure, and I can't wait till we get together next week.
Yep, looking forward to it, Spencer.